Alright, welcome to 4-2, adding and subtracting rational numbers. We don't have any vocabulary today because we're still just working with decimals and fractions. So we will be able to add and subtract rational numbers and describe the differences in adding different types of rational numbers. So we're going to add the following of these. Okay, the first one we have 3 sevenths plus 2 sevenths. So you have a common denominator of the sevenths, so that means 3 sevenths plus 2 sevenths. We add the numerators, and we get 5. So our answer is 5 sevenths. Okay, for number 2, we have not the same denominator, so we need common denominators. So what do 5 and 8 both go into? Well, they both go into 40. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom here by 5. So 3 times 5 is 15. Over here, I'd multiply top and bottom by 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 plus 15 is 23, so you get 23 40ths. Okay, and then last one, I'm going to write this vertically, 1.29 plus 4.38. Remember, we always line up those decimal points. So 9 plus 8 is 17, carry the 1. 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 1 is 6, and 4 plus 1 is 5. So 5.67. or 67 hundredths. Alright, number 1, we're going to evaluate 2 sevenths plus negative 5 sevenths. So when we're given fractions, we want to make sure our answer is a fraction. Okay, so we're going to determine if we're adding or subtracting. I know it says adding here, but really when we have adding a negative, that means we're going to subtract. So I'm going to take the bigger one, 5 sevenths, minus 2 sevenths. And I knew 5 sevenths was bigger because when I look at the numerators, 5 is bigger than 2, and I have the same denominators. So 5 minus 2 is 3 sevenths, and now I think is it positive or negative? So I have a positive 2 sevenths and a negative 5 sevenths, and that 5 was bigger, so it's going to be negative 3 sevenths. Okay, number 2, we're going to evaluate negative 2/3 minus 5/8. So when given fractions, we want to make sure we keep our answer as a fraction. So in this case, we need to find common denominators and make those equivalent fractions. So what do 3 and 8 both go into? They both go into 24. So this is going to be 24. There's a minus in the middle. Okay, so over here to get 3 to 24, I would multiply by 8. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 8. 2 times 8 is 16. And there was a negative sign there. Over here I multiply by 3. 5 times 3 is 15. So since it's subtracting, I'm going to change it to adding the opposite. So I'm going to have negative 16 24ths. Change subtracting to adding. And then the opposite of 15, a positive 15, is a negative 15. So that means we're really just going to add them and keep this sign, keep the negative sign. So 16 plus 15 is 31, and keep it negative over 24. Since it's an improper fraction, I'm going to change it to a mixed number. So 24 fits into 31 one time. Okay, that'd be like if we're doing, I don't know, I'm trying to work here. 31 divided by 24 fits in there once, so 1 times 24 is 24. Subtract, borrow, 11 minus 4 is 7. So negative 1 and 7 24ths. Just double check that we can't simplify it. I don't believe we can, so that's it. Okay, example 3, we're going to evaluate negative 7/8 minus negative 3 and 21 hundredths. So when given a fraction and a decimal, we want to keep our answer as a decimal, so we can have a decimal answer. So we're going to convert that fraction into a decimal. To do that, we're going to use our calculator. So I'm going to go to calculate. Whoops, hit escape to get out of that. Okay, and I'm going to do negative 7 divided by 8. I get negative 0.875. So this is really negative 0.875 minus negative 3.21. So now I'm going to change the subtracting to adding the opposite. So I keep this as a negative 0. Whoops, that's an 8. 75. Change that subtracting to adding. Opposite of a negative is a positive, so 3.21. So when I have a positive and a negative, I actually subtract. So my bigger number is 3.21, or 3 21/100ths, because that 3 is bigger than 0. So I'm going to take 3 and 21/100ths. I'm going to subtract 0 and 875 thousandths, making sure my decimals line up. So this is going to end up being a 0 here. So I can't do 0 minus 5, so I borrow from the 1. That becomes a 0, and I get 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. I can't do 0 minus 7, so I take away from the 2, that's a 1, or borrow. So 10 minus 7 is 3. Borrow from the 3, that becomes 2. 11 minus 8 is also 3. Bring down to the decimal. 2 minus 0 is 2. So now I need to decide, did I have more positives or negatives? Well, this was the negatives. It's positives, I had positive 3 wholes. And this was negative 0 wholes, so I had more positives. So this is my final answer. Okay, back side. 2 more examples left. So example 4, we're going to evaluate 2 2/3 minus 4.51. Now this one's going to be a little bit more complicated because of the 2 2/3. Alright, so that's going to be, we're going to convert that into a decimal. So that's going to be 2 point, now when I do 2 divided by 3 in my calculator, why is this still, so 2 divided by 3, and I get 0.66666 repeating. Remember that 7 just shows up because it rounded it. So that's going to be 2.6 repeating. Okay, minus 4.51. Okay, so if I change that to adding the opposite, that'd be 2.6 repeating plus a negative 4.51. So since I have a positive and a negative, I end up subtracting. So I'm going to do 4.51 minus, and I'm going to write this as 2.66666. That's going to help me figure out, I know it goes on forever and ever and ever, but I'm not going to be able to write that because I'd be doing it forever. I'm going to put zeros on top. This helps me determine what would it be in the end, okay? So I need to borrow from this 1, that becomes a 0, this becomes a 10, which really becomes a 9, that becomes a 10, which becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. So 10 minus 6 is 4, 9 minus 6 is 3, 9 minus 6 is 3, and then this was 5, so borrow, that becomes a 4, so 10 minus 6 is 4. I can't do that, so borrow from here, that's a 3. So 14 minus 6 is 8. 0.3 minus 2 is 1. So this 4 is because there wasn't another 6. If there was another 6, we would have had to borrow and make that a 9. It would have kept going. So it's really 3 repeating here. So we have 1.843, and just the 3 is repeating. Okay? And I have 2 positives, 2 whole positives, 4 negatives, so my answer is going to be negative. Alright, if you want to double check that 3 repeating in your calculator, you could do the 4.51 minus 2.66666, and literally just keep typing 6's in until, I don't know when. I can keep going as long as I want. And equals, and that gives me 3. So that means the 3 is repeating. Alright, number 5, last one. Evaluate negative 3.498 plus 7.25, 498 thousandths, 25 hundredths. When given 2 decimals, we want to keep our answer as a decimal. Okay, so I'm going to add, or one's negative, one's positive, so that means I'm actually going to subtract. So 7.25 minus 3.498 thousandths. Put in a 0, borrow. 10 minus 8 is 2, borrow. 14 minus 9 is 5, borrow. 11 minus 4 is 7, bring down the decimal. 6 minus 3 is 3. And add 3 negatives and 7 positives with some decimals, so that would be my final answer. Okay, if given 2 fractions, we want to write our answer as a fraction. That's important to know. Otherwise, if there's a decimal involved, we want to write our answer as a decimal. Alright, and that is it.